I think the yoga energy, the union energy goes so well with them, because if you think about it, horses are they're so connected, that herd mentality and the union. And so when we go to be with them, we really have an opportunity to be more like a horse, to be more in their space than in our space.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Kate Neligan. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Kate is an Equine-Partnered Life and business coach who helps her clients with their intuition, emotional intelligence, and empowered leadership both virtually and in person with horses. Kate left her vice president of marketing career at a movie studio to pursue her calling for the transformation that is possible from the human-animal bond. She is certified in Equine Experiential Education and has a master's degree in spiritual psychology. Kate is passionate about helping women to thrive and is a best-selling author with stories in the books The Power of Being a Woman and Women Will Save the World. She is also an animal communicator and healer and is published in the books Animals and Nature by Common Sentience. Kate is a motivated speaker with a TEDx talk on perfectionism. The Awakening with Equine certification program and 40-card oracle deck she created is for new or next level equine partnered coaches who are trailblazing new paths with humans and horses. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we just read through your bio. Tell us a little bit more about your story and how your journey with horses ultimately began.
Well, I started when I was young riding, so I was about 10, and my mom had loved horses, so she sort of got me into it and was so dedicated. She was driving me like an hour to my riding lessons every week. But I just sort of fell in love with horses and riding at an early age. I was always a huge animal lover. And then I competed in college. I took some time off in my 20s because I was working in New York City and didn't really have access to horses. And then I started to lease a horse around the time that I was leaving my corporate career. And she really profoundly changed my life. I was a very driven, egocentric, person that really needed to slow down and become more heart-centered and more present. And that horse really helped change my life. And then since then, I've had, my own horses. I've rescued some horses and I work with them in a life coaching capacity. So I got trained in that, and I have a master's, as you mentioned, in really helping people with self-love and emotional intelligence. And so I find the horses have a lot to teach, so I'm glad to talk about them today.
Who are a few, most important horses in your life, or a few horses that come to the top of your head that have dramatically changed your life? What is their story?
Yeah, so one of the first was really a horse named Felici, and her name means happily in Italian. And she was a very expensive, high-end dressage horse that was basically thrown out to pasture at a young age, at 17 years old, because she wasn't being ridden anymore. She had developed melanoma. She didn't want to show. She was always having anxiety when she was showing. And so my friend purchased her. My friend actually wanted me to purchase her, but I was leaving my corporate job and concerned about finances, having a horse for the first time. So I leased her from my friend. She ultimately almost was like my horse at that time because I was the only one riding her and seeing her. And, her melanoma went into remission for a while because there was so much love and connection, and we were trail riding, and she was so happy. She didn't have to show. She could just be a horse with me. And she lived in a pasture with friends. She had a best friend, Icelandic horse. And she really taught me about what happiness actually means, and that it's not about performance. And I was coming out of my corporate career being so focused on performance at the same time. And we both did a lot of, healing together. And then she ultimately, her melanoma came back, and it came back strong and fast. And so she passed. And that was a huge, significant moment in my life. the first time I really went through significant grief. So I wrote her story, and I still need to get her book out into the world. But she really put me on my path. And then right after that, a horse named Lindsay came in, who was my first horse. And she was, not able to be ridden. She had a lot of physical issues, but she really wanted to work with people in a healing capacity. And she was there right after Felice passed, and I formed a bond with her. And then when that ranch moved, they gave her to me, and I moved her to a horse rescue in Los Angeles and really dove into doing coaching and healing work with her. And she was a huge heart horse. She broke her leg a couple of years after that and passed. So again, major grief lessons, but really put me in, and this work, my calling, to do this work with people on the map.
That's very cool. So I know, man, it seems like every guest that we've had on the show has some sort of profound healing journey that parallels their relationship with their horse or horses. I know personally, I've had a very profound journey, and Alyssa has as well. What do you think about horses in that way, and the horse-human connection specifically, and their propensity to assist us in our own journey of healing?
I think like many animals, we find them, or they find us, at times when we are going through transformation or need to be going through some sort of transformation. I do think of it as an awakening, as a process of getting to know ourselves better, getting to know our life purpose, who we are, how we want to be of service, why we're on the planet. And I think they have so much to teach us. So we find horses where their challenges might parallel ours, so we can work through them together. Their teaching and what they most want to contribute is also something we need. Like my horse now, Phoenix, she is all about joy. And that's really what I need to be focused on, is more joy. And so I find that we find horses and they find us because we have things that we want to contribute to each other and learn from. And we don't always know which horse is the right horse for us, but the universe does. And so I do think there's a lot of healing that can be done when we're more conscious and more open and more mindful about horses, obviously as sentient beings, horses as healers, energy workers, teachers, rather than just what we've known horses to be for so long, which is this traditional sport, right? Like I grew up thinking horses were fun to ride, thinking horses were there for me, to give riding lessons, until I was like, whoa, this is, an incredible, enlightened spiritual teacher right here that I need to slow down, listen to, and connect with, and make it about a mutually beneficial relationship rather than it being just human-centric.
That sounds powerful. So you are an animal communicator. In what ways has this communication helped you to shift? It sounds like shift your ways, your first ways of being with horses to how you are now.
It has. I feel like I started to hear the horses when I did slow down more. I became more present. I was more focused on my breathing. And I think animals really connect through a heart space. So just like my deep love for them also created connection. And then I could hear them, and I could hear a horse say one day, when are the kids coming back? Because she missed having the kids there for summer camp. And I heard her and I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, oh, they're coming back. And she didn't really need adults. She wanted these kids back, at the ranch where we were. And, or a horse that will, they have these incredible one-liners. I find as horses, they're very direct. They're not very verbose. They deliver really succinct messages. And I think often it's about reminding us of who we are, like who we truly are as beings of love and beings of light and energy. It's a whole remembering of who we are, because so often we're overthinking, and my horses now will say like, okay, you're thinking too much, or you're doing too much, or like drop into your heart or feel your feet. And so I think there's just a lot for me where my relationship with them is deeper now, because I can hear them. I'm clairaudient, and I've been trained in animal communication as well. And now I train others in it, because I find that it helps us. Like, it helps us when a horse is like, I'm not feeling well, or I need this, or I need that. It's so much easier to take better care of them when we can actually hear them and be in communication with them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I want to uncover some of the animal communication aspects, because I'm not a professional in that way by any stretch. However, I'm finishing up a memoir. It's called From Horseback to the Himalayas, and it's my own personal journey of healing. And the opening chapter of that book is called A Broken Heart. And so it was a very profound moment, one of many actually that I've had over the years with the horses. And specifically, this was with Alyssa's horse named Willow, who's a prior wild Mustang. I think she's still a wild Mustang. She's a fantastic horse. But Alyssa and I had a bit of a falling out in our relationship, and she went off to her mom's. And I stood with this horse, with Willow, in a complete release of my heart and in a total deep meditative space. And the image of a broken beating heart and its vivid imagery was displayed in my mind's eye, as clear as any dream that I've ever had. And the heart was beating, and it was trying its best to pump blood, and I saw that. And I got a bit startled by it and like opened my eyes abruptly, came out of the meditative space, and this horse is like standing there with her head bowed and in complete relaxation. And so I went back into that space, and the same image appeared. And the reason I bring that up is, as you mentioned, the horses kind of communicate in these succinct messages. And that really resonates with me, because every aspect of communication with the horse I've had has been very profound, very wise, sage-like guidance from the horse. And in this particular instance, it was like, that heart right there, Jason, is yours. And that went on to kind of like expand a lot of kind of like what was going on in my life and in my own healing journey. And it really set the stage for what was to come in the months following. And so I'd like to get kind of, if you have some if you can elaborate on that a bit, and then tell us a bit more for the people listening who may not know what animal communication is, and maybe what you feel like your unique gift or technique, if you will, for lack of better words, might be.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I do believe they also often send photos or pictures, so in that mental telepathy, which is an advanced skill that we can all have. I believe we can all be intuitive. We can all talk to animals. We can all talk to all of sentient life. If we're sentient, it's a matter of staying in that beginner's mind and the curiosity and the openness. And you mentioned meditative state, which is really, I think, what it is. It's coming into a different theta, beta, like coming into a different brainwave, coming into a relaxation and more of a parasympathetic nervous system. And we can connect in that space more deeply and receive guidance from other beings. I do find the horses are sage-like. I think I think of them like yogic masters sometimes, right? Where, we used to sit in the Himalayan mountains and listen to, like masters and receive from them. But we can do that from the horses, especially like a wild horse who has been so in touch with all of its senses on such a deep level that we've forgotten about with technology and driving around and the busyness of human life. And so the horses are constantly in touch with nature and communicating non-verbally. We can read their body language. That's how obviously a lot of training is. It's reading body language, but there's much more than just body language. You know what I mean? And so I find that they'll show us things when we need to see it. They'll show us, like one of the first experiences I had was I really wanted to ride one day, and my mare Felici, who I was leasing, she did not want to be ridden, and I was really frustrated, and I felt so rejected. I felt like I was being rejected, and so I remember I laid down on this hay bale. And all of a sudden I saw like a movie of all the times in my life that I had been rejected from different people and places and spaces. And I started to cry and like emote and release. And this other incredible Arabian who came from the same place that she was walked over, and he just stood over me. And I could feel my entire body and my energy change. And I was really releasing. And I haven't had the same reaction to being rejected. I mean, it never feels great, but it's not something like I was taking as personally, or I didn't have as much of like a wounded pain body around it, because I felt like this other horse was also helping me clean up that energy, that was kind of stuck. So I wouldn't be surprised that they would show you your heart space, because they want our heart space to be purified, cleansed, congruent, coherent, because they're always reading our energies and our hearts. Their hearts are 5 times the size of ours. I find sometimes if I'm like going like this at the ranch, I'll start hearing blowouts. I'll start hearing they're trying to release the tension. And then the second I breathe and relax and meditate, you'll hear a different, they'll be like, there's like a sigh, and they're like, oh, because they're feeding off our energy and they're feeling our energy significantly. So, I mean, I really believe that they have such huge hearts to want to help us. And so communication to me is a way to really honor them so that we can listen to them. They have a lot to say. Many of them have a lot they want to contribute to humanity. It's just we need to learn skills to be able to do that. If interspecies communication isn't something that comes naturally, we can practice it the way like we can practice meditation. Meditation doesn't always come naturally to a lot of people, but we can grow that skill set through intention, through practice, through breath, through the heart space, and through meditation. And so, and staying open, like getting out of our way, where a lot of people come to me and they don't feel confident. And I'm like, what if you could just trust that you know this, you can do this, and then I like to have people practice with things I already know and can confirm for them. And then they're like, wait, I did really get that. I'm like, you completely got that accurate, because that's exactly what that goat, because I have goats too, goat or horse would say. So yeah, hopefully that answers it, but there's so much I could share about it. I think, and some of them like to talk more than others, kind of like humans. So
yeah, that's definitely been experience that I've had, pretty much everything you just said. And I know Alyssa and I have had similar experiences. It's interesting you mentioned the Himalayas. I went on a pilgrimage up in the Himalayas up to the sacred Kedarnath temple. And along the way, I was like, it was a difficult trek for a lot of reasons. And I remember thinking a lot that like my space back home, like there's not necessarily a necessity to travel around the world and be in so-called sacred spaces. And I'm glad you touch on that. However, I think it's fun. It's beneficial from like a human experience perspective to do those things, perhaps, if you're so led. Do you have any particular practice, be it yoga or otherwise, that helps you to get in the space, to be more communicative with yourself and the horses?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to sit on the ground. I feel like getting really grounded helps. I find, when I do meditations with horses with clients, I ask them to wiggle their toes inside of their shoes and be seated in open body posture and to just start breathing and relaxing. Sometimes I like to go in through like a sacred space that I have in my mind's eye where I'm like in a garden and very like there's sunlight. I feel very safe and nurtured. So that kind of happy place space can get the body into more relaxation, more receptivity. And, I really have the purity of intention, my intentions to listen, my intentions to connect. It's so fast for me now because, I've always found the horses are the easiest, but I talk to dogs and cats and goats as well. But, I find often like animals are often ready and willing and wanting to speak as soon as we slow down and pause. I tell people sometimes bring a journal and just write down any pictures. You might be more clairvoyant and seeing pictures, right? And getting the images like the broken heart. Some people are clairsentient and they're going to feel into and sensation in their body, and that has happened to me a lot. I mean, I spend a lot of hours with my horses. So like all of a sudden, if I feel like a twinge in my right shoulder, I go check the right wither on one of my horses. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that does feel knotty. And then so that's how I'll do some of the energy work and the healing work too, is I'll sometimes feel it in my body. But I've cultivated kind of a way of being in the world that is very empathic because of how many people I'm talking to and how many animals I'm talking to. And so it's more natural now. I think it's something I always had. I just had to not be afraid of it, not push it away, and not think, and I got out of my own way where I used to think it was like weird. I mean, because I used to be an atheist and a scientist and I was like, so the more I've just adopted the belief system that this is possible and that it's helpful and that it's practical, I've been able to work with it better instead of like pushing it away.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I come from a very like fundamental Christian background in my childhood and early adulthood. And the things that I've encountered and done just like within the past year, I'm going to hell, you know what I mean? For lack of better ways to express it, from those belief systems. Which brings me to a topic that's been really interesting to me as of late. And that's tarot and oracle. And so you mentioned the oracle deck, and Alyssa, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kate is the one that you mentioned that has the new deck. So maybe you could talk to us more about that and maybe dispel some of the things for our listeners that I know there's some listeners out there. And if you're listening and this whole idea has, if this resonates with you in a way of like, oh man, oracle or tarot, that's like woo woo or wrong or these crazy people talking about this stuff, hang with us. And I think Kate's going to shed some light on it for us.
Thanks. Yeah, it's funny because I was such a scientist that I was such an atheist that now all belief systems are somewhat okay for me to really hear and be with, because I was in that space for a bit where you had to prove it to me for it to actually be true, until I started to have existential experiences that I couldn't explain. And I started to feel and see and experience things that there had to be some sort of other explanation. And there is a science to a lot of different things now, which is about energy and law of attraction, just like law of gravity. So, there is something to the law of attraction of like what you're feeling into and then what you pull from a card deck, right? And what you kind of need. Do I know how everything works? No, but do any of us? I mean, that's what's so fun, is that we can stay in the mystery of like, why are horses so sage-like? I mean, we can say it's because they've been on the planet a long time, right? And why does a card deck work? And how do the horses, how are their energy actually in the card deck as much as they are? Because people get the deck and they say, I feel the horses, I feel their energy. And so, the Awakening with Equines deck is something that the horses wanted me to do. One day I was sitting at my desk and I heard them say, write down everything we teach. And so I just grabbed a piece of paper and I wrote down 40 qualities like trust and patience and, all the things that even if you're horseback riding and that's all you're doing with horses or you're training, they still are teaching us as riders, as trainers, these qualities and their emotional intelligence qualities, because the horses are, in my opinion, emotional beings more than they are thinking beings. They're not like, we should go do this, we have to do this. They don't put all those, their brains are different than ours, but they feel, their guts are huge, right? They feel this feels good, this doesn't feel good, right? And that all comes down to safety, but we're in that same place too, right? We make a lot of choices off of our own personal safety. So the deck is something that came from a place of how can I honor what the horses teach? And then the artist they led me to, because I had a different artist to start, is Nika Ware, who's an incredibly gifted human horse, connection artist who's a magician, and she's like a priestess, and she gets the human horse connection, and the horses wanted her to draw. And so I gave her photos inspired by either my relationship with different horses, because I've worked with over 100 horses at this point, or clients being with horses. And I wanted to show that human animal bond through the art. So she took my photos, drew them. And so the other thing is that a lot of the horses in the deck have passed on. They're on the other side. So it was really an honoring process of them, but also like it's their legacy. And so I feel their energy is really imbued, as energy is imbued in anything. If you look at like a wood maker who creates a table, his energy is in that table that he made with his hands, and so the energy of the horses is there through their art and through their photo, through Nika and her creation, through my intention of wanting to help people connect with their wisdom more. So I think when, you have them all spread out and you pick one and you ask a question, so much is through intention. The world can be created every day. We can create through intention. My intention is to drive to the ranch right now. Usually you drive to the ranch. My intention is to go to the store and buy, food. Usually you create that, right? And so we're always creating our own reality. So it's as simple as that. My intention is to receive guidance from this deck, and you pull a card and then you're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed. And so for me, the deck has been like the way I've used it recently. I've had a broken heart over the last couple of weeks because I just lost my cat, and he was the most significant relationship in my life. And I was using the deck to work through healing him and myself and to process my grief. And it was, what do I need right now? What does he need? And so it was always asking these questions and getting guidance and feeling less alone and feeling more connected and feeling supported. And that's really all the Oracle deck is for. It's not, woo-woo magic, although I love that too. It's just really a support system.
That's beautiful. I've stumbled across your Oracle deck a number of times, and each time I see it, I'm like, man, I'm gonna get that one day. It's absolutely like such a beautiful idea, and I mean, you answered a fair amount of questions I had, because prior to this conversation, I was talking to Dad, and I was like, man, I wonder, like, where did she get this idea from? But I have one question for you about this deck. You mentioned, I saw somewhere either on your website or a Facebook post, before you ship off these decks to people, your horses bless them. What is this process? What does it look like and feel like for you and them?
Thank you. I just did it this morning with a batch that went out to the post office as we're speaking. And my mom helped bring them to the post office today. So I have some video, which I need to post, of my horses doing this. But, my Phoenix and Sleeta are my two current horses, and they're on the front or the back side of, I guess, all of the decks. And they, I hold the decks out to them in a bag, and I go, time to bless the decks. And yeah, you could say a horse would come over and wants to smell what's in the bag or think, oh, maybe there's treats. But the way they do it is so neat. They pause, and then they go, and they dip their head and they blow, and then they lift their head back up. And it's just so neat. And like one day Phoenix didn't want to do it. And I was like, why wouldn't you want to bless the decks? I was like, hold on, let me tell you where they're going. I'm like, there's one to Australia, and there's one to Germany, and there's one. And she ran over as soon as I told her where they were going, and she put her head in. And today she said to me, she goes, there's more? And I'm like, yeah, we're trying to, there's like 20 of them left before I have to do another order. And so she's like, yeah, there's more, because I just had her do it a few days ago. So it's become this fun thing where I want them to feel involved in the process. And I feel like it puts a level of energy and protection and love into it. And it's more intentional. And people say they feel them. Like people sometimes will get them, and like one of them, like it flew everywhere. Like the deck just like flew all over. Other people will get them, and they say that like, it just provides them a lot of comfort. They use them with clients. You can have horses pick them. So you can have your Mustang, you can spread the cards out and say, which one do you want me to focus on more of with you next year, right? And see which one, as you hold them out, that, your horse picks. And then you have there's exercises in the booklet too, that you can do with your horses. So, yeah.
And that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I totally hear you and get you when you say you want them to be involved. That has been like one of my missions in my horsemanship journey. And at this point, I've done so much, and I'm still working toward doing so much. But my horse, my Mustang, and I have a painting business. And it's just, it's a way for me to... It's a way for us to connect and have a good time, but it's also a way for me to more understand her story. And it's just one of those, like, I feel like I can connect with what you're saying in that way through Willow and her artwork, just given there's this feeling that comes from that, that I'm sure is just absolutely familiar to you. Do you know the difference between a tarot deck and an oracle deck? It's been a question I've had for a while.
Yeah, I love that you do that with Willow. And I think that's so, I think it's so special that we honor them at such a high level like that. And they're not, I think horses are so creative, and they don't just want to always stand around and, just be horses. And they also don't want to sometimes just be ridden constantly. I think they want to do unique things with their humans. And so the more creative we can get with them, the better. So the definition, so the tarot or tarot deck is based off of, kind of an ancient system where they had like swords and wands and pentacles, and there's different suites, and it's kind of mapped in some ways to like the traditional cards, which are, spades and hearts and whatnot. And so it's based on like a very specific tarot, Rider-Waite being one of the original decks, where they had it be, the Fool and the Hangman and all of the specifics. So you read it a very specific way. And there's been different iterations off of the tarot deck or tarot, and it's worked for a very long time. It's a very kind of ancient system. Oracle is a more broad term for basically taking any type of art, even like this is just like a little sticker, and like if you look at this and focus, what is their message in it? Can you use your own intuition and the artwork as a portal for your imagination, which is really where a lot of intuition and creativity is connected to, for messages, for divination, ways to actually receive guidance because we're focused on art, right? So if this sticker has 5, flowers on it, is there some sort of significance right now to the sunflower in your life, and to 5, right? Is there something there? And so, yes, we can read into things sometimes, but often it's a way to bypass that very linear ego-based mind into that space of creativity and expanded consciousness and mindfulness, and then be able to pull in guidance through visual, right? And our eyes are so powerful for taking in the world. And so the oracle is really to see and to feel into images to receive guidance. So lots of decks are actually oracle decks because they're based on different art that have meaning. And then some are the words, the words that are on different decks, or the words that are also in the booklet. And I wrote the booklet channeling the horses because I wanted them to have a voice, and that's a piece of a lot of what I do. Even being here with you on the podcast, my intention is always to give the horses a voice.
Oh, so fascinating. And I want to unpack some of that because this goes back to earlier this year for me, and just my own spiritual awakening journey and healing journey. And as our listeners know, and I won't go deep into this because we've done it before, but I was diagnosed with leukemia back in 2017. And the past year has been nothing short of a miraculous healing journey and awesome spiritual awakening. And part of that was this energetic portal of creativity that opened, whereby I now have a stack of approaching about 100 poems that I wrote primarily between the months of February and May. And it started, I can't remember the exact date, but it started with our second Mustang mare. Her name is Grace, and she's a gray, and the poem is entitled Gray Wild. And it's basically, it was a channel, like there's no doubt about it. Like I did not write this poem. I'm not a poet. I still say I'm not a poet. I don't know when you actually officially become a poet. I think Rumi was known for saying he wasn't a poet. So anyways, this poem came through, and it was her communicating with me just herself and her fears and her anxieties, her frustrations, and also her love and willingness. And as I was attempting to work with her on the halter, and we had her, Alyssa, what was it, just maybe a couple weeks at that point? Yeah. So she was new to us. And what I'm getting at with that is, like, I come from a background that is very shut off to a lot of this energetic sort of like belief systems. And that has I've totally shifted that in my mind and being. And as a result, I've become I guess you could say more right brain. I don't know if the left and right brain really works even presently in a scientific realm. Maybe you could shed some light on that, but I've heard different things whereas we're really not right or left brain. It's just kind of a way of expressing it. Anyways, creativity has come, and I'm now like, I'm playing music again. I'm singing, I'm writing. And this is all part of this journey that has, I call the horses like my spiritual Sherpa in that way. And I don't know where I'm going with that, but you struck a chord with like everything that you just said, and your description of the Oracle deck, and even art, just kind of, it is a light language. It is, we can look at it and it's not necessarily verbal. It can be, music is, but, looking at even the photos or the pictures that these artists draw in these Oracle decks, and it embodies that energy and transfers it over into a way that we can utilize.
Yeah, I love it. I think you're both artists and your horses are as well. And it's embracing that however it shows up. One of my friends is a mural artist, and now she's a writer, and she has a book called The Reluctant Artist. And it's a great read. And it's about that. If we didn't grow up with it, and we don't think, one of my friends once said to me, "Oh, I'm not creative at all." And I'm like, look at your house. Look how well you've decorated. Like, that is creativity, and I didn't think I could paint. And I know we talked about the painting behind me before we started. It's like, I didn't think I had that in me. And I know I can't draw the way Nika can draw, that's for sure. But I find that one of my core values is beauty. And I find the horses are so beautiful. It's one of the things that people say to me the most. It's one of the cards in the deck, but there's so much there in the beauty of poetry and music and painting and singing. And it's really self-expression. So I think sometimes it's like, if we were to look at the second chakra as being a portal for creativity, now I'm in the whole chakra language, but one that gets opened up, and sometimes it does get opened up through like a healing crisis, then we have access to, or even if it's, our third eye or our crown, those top chakras, we're accessing more than just our humanness, right? Our ego. And I think that's also why I stopped being an atheist, because that life was very constricting to just care about myself and my title, money, and all the like things the world says we should have. I got all of that, and I was still really unhappy. And that's why that was actually what inspired me to do my TEDx talk. Cause I'm like, why do so many high level people get to these incredible levels of success, and then they're still unhappy and they're still unfulfilled? And I really think it's twofold. One, they're not in touch with being of service, really truly what it's like to be of service. And the horses are, and the horses get that. They are service beings. So they can remind us of that. In addition to like the joy that comes from creating beauty, or co-creating really with a higher power, with spirit, whatever you want, whatever words you want to use, even just co-creating with love, co-creating with creativity, because we have voices and we can sing and we can paint, and we can let things move through us. And for me, one of the coolest experiences with the card deck was getting in touch with the muse that's behind the card deck, which is a very goddess-like energy, which I was stuck on the card deck for a long time until I started to work with one of my healers and intuitives, and she would tell me like, okay, well, the card deck is like wanting this or that. Because I do think what we create has its own energy. Like there's a muse, there's something we're working with. And the horse is a muse for so many people. Right. And the horse has been painted for centuries. You know, the horse has really been an inspiration. So I think it's like, if it brings joy to you, that's what's most important, because then others around you will feel that joy. Right. And if it feels like it's beauty to you and then it brings it to others, that's just being of service. Right. So it really is about that self-expression, you know, and creativity. I mean, we create every single moment of our lives. Why not create more intentionally and do things like painting and poetry? I think that's awesome.
There's so much wrapped up in that. I mean, you mentioned the horse being painted for for a great amount of time. It's interesting whenever Willow paints a painting, and I look at them and I started tracing out like her hidden messages that I find in them. And every single time without fail, I can find a horse. And I know like her physical body doesn't have the ability to see like all the color spectrum that I can see as a human, but I tell her, I mean, there's an energy wrapped up, there's my energy wrapped up in every color that I know she feels. And so whenever I paint with her, I put the canvas down below her and I tell her, I give her a list of colors. This is blue, this is yellow, this is orange, this is red, you know, it continues on, and she'll pick the colors she wants to work with. And then as I'm giving it to her, I'll, you know, how about we use some red? And I'll give it to her, and if she doesn't want red on the canvas at that time, she'll paint the mat that I have the canvas sitting on, so none of the paint gets on the canvas. So then I'll switch, I'll give her a different color. This is blue. And she'll, oh, I can use blue, and she'll paint. And it's like communicating with this non-verbal being, and I use my quotes because I know she's not like verbally communicating with me, but to me she's communicating with me and on this art. And it's such an incredible connection to it, like it's so incredible to share that with a wild horse, and then being able to share that with others and help tell Willow's divine, powerful story, because she has one.
It's this idea that we've talked about a lot on the show, and between you and I, Alyssa, of this idea of collaboration and communication, not control. And you know, the great modern mystic yogi guru, Sadhguru, he has a quote. It says, "Collaboration is far more powerful than competition. Body and brain work best when you are joyful and peaceful, not when you are pushed to the wall." And I just absolutely love that idea. And, you know, it kind of brings full circle back around to, you know, I think where we're at in the world, and Kate, I think you can piggyback on this, is like there's so much commotion and turmoil and things going on in the world. But at the end of the day, like, when we go inside, like, you know, I say like the greatest journey is within. And when we take that journey, even if we're just willing to take that first step inward, it starts to really clear out all the frustration and clutter and commotion that we see outwardly happening in the world. And then that leads us in this deeper exploration of collaboration and ultimately living a joyful life, which at the end of the day, it's all we're looking for as human beings and beings in general, is happiness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's why my first most powerful horse was named Happily, because she was like, let's get you into true happiness, which is not the ego pursuit of life, and go spread it and go help other people with their happiness, you know. And as a coach, a lot of people come because they're stuck or they're grieving or they're unhappy or they don't know how to cultivate happiness, and they think they need to go do a bunch of things. And then the horses will be like, being is your key, right? Like that actual who you are being in the world, can change the world because it's your own unique energy. You're a work of art. We're all works of art, right? And so it's being that. And then it's also choosing and having and knowing that we get to choose, like we have the power to choose how we react to situations, how we handle situations, what we want to do in our life, how we want to handle illness or, painting. I love that you gave her choice. I love that you're allowing her, and horses can self-select. I mean, animals are really bright and, they can self-select herbs, essential oils, homeopathic remedies. You can see what they have their own innate intelligence, and I think humans, part of the biggest things that I want to see dismantled in the coming years is speciesism, which is thinking that humans know best and humans know all the answers. And I think really, the horses remind us that beingness truly matters and is where our joy and happiness is. Like there's enoughness in the moment and in our presence, and that we don't always have to strive so hard. And it isn't always about the doing, and if we're going to do the doing, do it with presence and do it with joy, So yeah, I just think you both get it so much about, who the horses are being in the world and how they're contributing. I love it.
They shared so much with me in that way. And I've developed this mantra, this personal mantra, largely because and through them. And it's just like everything that I do, I try, and I'm not perfect and like I don't succeed at this all the time, but the essence is there all the time. And it's simple. It just goes like, for whatever particular action or thought or thing that I'm bringing into the world or existing in, it's for joy, empathy, compassion, and love. And I think those 4 words, joy, empathy, compassion, and love, for me is really like, it embodies all the religions. It embodies all the belief systems. It embodies the balance of masculine and feminine energies. It really just opens up a gateway for an exuberant life and existence with all and about all things. And it sounds like that's, what you're tapping into like on a daily basis in your work with others and the horses. So it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, thanks. I think people are in awe of them. And when we're in awe, of their size and how intentional they are and like how they will come over and put a head into someone's heart when they're grieving, or, they will, if I have my phone, they'll try to nudge my phone right out of my hand because I don't think they like the vibration of it. Or they'll surface stuff that we need to see. Like if I have some anger, it will come out in my horse training at times. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I don't need to do it that way anymore. It's not about control, right? It's not, and like, why am I frustrated? This horse doesn't want to listen to me. That's okay. She has a right to say no to me also, and so there's so much good stuff if we are really conscious of the experience rather than one of my friends has a prayer where it's like, please, help me to remember that I don't know, and I don't know that what I don't know, and then I'm willing to not know, and then show me what I do need to know, and I think the horses for me are always showing me like, oh yeah, I need to remember that. So I love those 4 words that you're focused on. I think that that's the authentic self. And that's what the horses would want us to focus on. I would add presence too and grounding. I think they really want us to feel just here, being here now, instead of wherever we go in our minds, which is usually the past or the future, right?
There's so much significance to that. Also, I've recently started a yoga practice, went through a retreat and came back home and am now doing this mandala. And I was outside, we were outside yesterday, and this was our first day back home since the retreat just this past weekend, and sat out there, started the practice, and in the practice there's movements along with like being totally in tune with my breath, and Grace came over and was just like completely in it and like feeling my energy, and totally just confirmed everything, or you totally just confirmed everything I got from her meditating yesterday morning, because that's exactly what she was desiring, was just that grounding and that presence and that connection. And it's just she helped amplify the entirety of the energy that I needed to feel in that moment. So that was, thank you for that clarity.
Well, that's so well said. That, and I think the horses they're yogic masters because they know meditation and they know breath. And one of mine, her favorite thing is to meditate with me. And the other one is to move. She wants to move. She processes more. She's younger and she's a saddlebred quarter horse. So she processes through movement. But what's so cool about yoga is that it's all those things too, right? It's movement, it's balance. And I remember in the early days when I started doing this, someone said, Kate, you'd make a great yoga teacher. And I'm like, no, I can be dyslexic. I cannot teach, I can't remember any of that stuff. But it made me realize yoga and horses would probably pair well together. So we did yoga on horseback workshops, and then we did yoga on the ground, and they love it. Like there was one horse in Los Angeles, anytime I went into a yoga pose or tree, he was just like right there. And I always say, like, if the horses had human jobs, I think some of them would be yoga teachers, meditation teachers, artists. I think they would be, my horse Lindsay was a sound bath healer. She always wanted to be working with sound and that kind of thing. So it's really neat. I think the yoga energy, the union energy goes so well with them, because if you think about it, horses are they're so connected, that herd mentality and the union. And so when we go to be with them, we really have an opportunity to be more like a horse, to be more in their space than in our space, because there's not a ton of benefit to always being in our heads and always being busy. And we have a lot in life to do that. But when we can go be, like I've worked with wild horses before too in workshops, when we can go into their space and learn about what, like, as you said earlier, Jason, the sacred space, or the yogic principles that they've already embodied, we can learn and receive so much from that. I've had the most incredible experiences, downloads, awarenesses, healings, all just by slowing down and doing nothing with them. So I'm sure Grace was super excited to be in that space with you, because it's a different type of connection. And you were almost like the Alyssa horse version of yourself connecting with Grace.
It's so great.
Right?
Just really becoming more horse-like. And I think even for people who may not have ever been around horses, or they're intimidated or even scared or fearful of them, can find some, simple ways. And Alyssa's on a mission. I mean, newly minted 18-year-old on a mission to bring more of that to the world. And so she's got a lot of ideas in that way. And I love the fact that you mentioned yoga, and the term union, which is really how yoga is defined in English terms. And I've come to learn that, yoga, at least in our Western society, typically means like some sort of contorted body movements or postures or stretches or exercise. And really it's just, yoga is a technology, and it's something that we can do to experience reality. And it's like everything that we do and the way we move through this experience we call life, in effect, is yoga. And so to just be able to slow down and acknowledge that, and the horses, like you said, they're yogi masters. They just do it consistently on a regular basis, and they're fantastic models for us to follow.
I totally agree. And yoga was the first spiritual practice I got into when I was 20. It's my oldest. I was 21. I found it in a gym in New York City, of all places. And the first time I did it, it was almost like a remembering. My soul remembered something, but I was like, oh, I love this. And now my favorite thing and way to do yoga is actually to do it pairing it with things. So I've done goat yoga. I've done yoga in a cat cafe. And it's not about the movements, but it is about unifying and potentially unifying things that wouldn't necessarily go together too. And that's something I also like. I love pairing the horses with other modalities like labyrinths or sound baths or art, because I feel like they also like that creativity. And then the onus isn't just on, oh, we're just going to learn from horses. There's a level of like mixing and synergizing the energies that can amplify it. Like you said before too, Alyssa, like it just, I think that the horses really appreciate how we show up and the energy we show up in, and how the energy we're in and what we bring impacts our life and our relationships more than anything else that we do.
Yeah, I absolutely love all of that. It just I'm actually kind of speechless, because it's just, to me, it's like what the world needs. And I'm not implying that everybody needs to go out and get their own horse. But it's more so just, the idea of that we have an imbalance in the world. And maybe as we kind of try to wrap up here, I'm curious what your take is on the masculine and feminine energies, and feel free to bring out and talk more about your book and stuff like that. I'm a man. I'm very happy being a man. I'm very solid in my manliness. But I also feel, especially over the past year, that I've become very observant and more aware of both the masculine and feminine energies, which I personally don't attribute to being male or female. I think the great avatars, and even if you want to go like from my background, the God-man Jesus Christ was a perfect example of perfect balance between masculine and feminine energies. And I don't know, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I love it. I find that the best way that I've come to understand it is through the teaching of the lead mare in a herd, which is often that we are meant to balance strength and softness. And strength often is seen as masculine energy, at least physically, but there's strength and softness in each of us, and the lead mare has both. I think that's what I love the most about horses, is they could be so dangerous if they wanted to be, and they're so strong and powerful, and people can be afraid of their size and power. I get those clients. And it's like, I remember once a client said, just because this horse is so big and powerful doesn't mean that she's going to misuse it, or he's going to misuse his power, and needed to really see that power is in the blending of strength and softness, masculine and feminine, being and doing, the whole polarity of what we're here for on Earth, because this is a polar planet. We get to look at those things, and we get to balance them out the best that we can. Balance is one of the cards in the card deck. Sometimes the horses want me to only pull that for weeks on a time, but it's about balancing it out and not being overly focused in just our doing, or in masculine energy, or in just strength. I'm going to power through this and not feel. right? Versus the feminine and, some of the softness and the intuition. And I love the wild horse herd as a metaphor for the lead mare often makes really really clear decisions that are wise and benefit the entire herd. And the stallion backs her up through strength and through corralling and through, but they work together. You can't have one without the other. You need both, and so I just think it's really neat that you're exploring, the energies of how you show up as Jason, and what that means. And I think, what we've seen in the world in the last year, especially, is labels are breaking, as we see all these different pronouns and everything's breaking. But so I go back to what is the truest way we can look at it. And I just think of it as strength and softness, and they're both masculine and feminine. We can just stay balanced. And I do work with a lot of women that work in male environments, and they become more male-like, and it doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve their female bodies. A horse is never going to try to be a cat. A horse is a horse, so we get to be if we're a female body, we get to be a female, if we're a male, we get to be a male, and to own that in the way that we need to own that, and know that we have, the polarity inside of us, and it's how we want to express it. Going back to the artist, I'm super grateful the horses have helped me with my own feminine energy, which I didn't always have in corporate America. And so, I think there is a return of the feminine on the planet. People think the horses are more feminine at times. I don't even see them as genders sometimes. I just see them as having the qualities that we also need to consider growing so that we get along better with ourselves and with each other.
Yeah, that's how I'm beginning to see things and articulate things. It's almost like, to me, masculine and feminine energies are mutually exclusive to gender. They're running parallel paths perhaps, but I know this kind of opens up, a can of worms as far as a whole nother discussion, but yeah, I've had a lot of inner work that I've gone through, and, coming through military background and all that type of thing. And just growing up in the 90s where I love how Warwick Schiller kind of talks about, that era, or maybe even a bit before that, of just the stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about mentality, and the broken masculinity, and this tilt toward you can't show any sort of emotion, otherwise you're a girl, and for some reason being a girl is less powerful and weaker in the grand scheme of society than being a man. And I've found in working with the horses, there couldn't be anything farther from the truth, and that's what you're touching on with the lead mare archetype. And to me, it just seems like if we're able to shed more light on that from a perspective of working with the horses, and I have a heart focus on the wild horses that we are ransacking and destroying their livelihood and bringing them into captivity. And they demonstrate such a profound willingness to share what I believe can ultimately fix humanity. That's my take.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. I think that's why I changed everything in my brand to Awakening with Equines, because they can fix humanity if we let them, if we focus on what is actually there. I think they're very high vibration, and I think vibration is not gender based. I think it's very what you said before: joy, love, empathy, compassion. I think it comes down to that. And I think that's when a lot of people heal, is when they feel the unconditional love and support by just being with a horse. They feel seen, they feel heard. People that maybe didn't ever have parents that were there for them in that way, and they feel so loved and seen by a 1,200-pound prey animal. And it's a complete game changer for them. So yeah, I think it's really neat that you're exploring this, and maybe there's more to come in the future, because I would love to see more men working with horses and learning from them. I've done some men's groups and they're so powerful, at first to just like, okay, let's release and dismantle anger, and you have every right to feel it. And then what's underneath that? A whole lot of hurt. And then is that okay to feel? And then what's under a lot of hurt? A lot of love, a lot of caring, and a lot of wanting to make a positive difference in the world, right? So it's allowing that to unfold. And I think sometimes it's easier to process with a horse. Everyone's like, I'm going to cry every time they come. And I'm like, that's what we do here. We cry with the horses. It's okay. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds, especially with people like both of you and the younger generations, even that are doing really, that get it, that are open and aware in new ways, which is really cool.
I love it. And I've been largely an over analytical being in my life, and very, I could say egocentric. And it's one of the things that I'm kind of breaking down in ways within my own book and I feel like there's like this triune of like the mind, body, and soul. And at any given part in life, like each one of these aspects can become sort of elongated or too short, not carrying their weight, and the triangle itself is weakened. And what I found is that like when we can, through yoga, through union, and it doesn't necessarily have to be yoga practice, that resonates with me. I think we could get there. There's one peak, many, many, many different paths. But as far as like balancing out those three legs of that triangle to make like that very strong geometric shape. And, it's caused me to really break down and do away with like an entire past life, to where I'm sitting really right now with a blank canvas, and I've barely started to get the paints out and a paintbrush, and feeling quite led to move into that direction of sharing this sort of stuff with other men, and so that's something that's kind of forthcoming for me, I think, as I go through kind of my second divorce and reworking life and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I feel that coming for you strongly, for sure. And how cool, because I think a lot of people can relate to you. And you also you're letting go of this past. You're shedding the past of like a staunch religion, right? Or upbringing, and like being able to shift from that. I mean, people are often drawn to me because I shifted out of atheism. When we shift out of like, just being very religious, people want to know how to do that too. When they realize this isn't working for me, or how do I hold my masculine energy that I love, but then and lead from a place of love, compassion, joy, and empathy, right? Like, how do I still have this very masculine container with a very forward energy of those qualities? Because that's there, So I think the horses blend energies the best, just like we can blend paints and we can, but it's like, what's really neat is I think like a higher level of self-expression is coming in through you, is from what I'm getting, and then with that, there's a huge opportunity as you step into that, like you give so many people permission to do the same, and especially other men who are like, wait, I can be a poet? Of course. Like, look how cool Rumi is, and that kind of stuff. My horse, after she passed, told me to get Rumi's book and read people poetry at the end of sessions. So I did it, but I haven't read them to people yet. I did like part one, but yeah, there's so much cool. We used to ride in a field, and we used to say it was that field out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing. There's a field. I'll meet you there. The non-judgmental field, but that's really where the horses are. They live in that non-judgmental
and the
field.
Poetry is so fascinating, like the way it's come through. Each one of these poems has been I don't think I've spent more than like 3 minutes on a poem. And then I just was like, okay, like it turned into a journal, and I would just like mark the day and time that they come through, for lack of better expression. And then as I started to flesh out and really write my book, a lot of the poetry is like, so I'm starting each chapter of the book with a poem that has been like almost miraculously selected for that chapter. And so, and there's like so much of that, that I feel in a lot of ways that I communicate with other men, especially, that they're just like waiting and yearning to like tap into this, but like, well, what will the world think? And how can I actually, like you said it, how can I still be that knight in shining armor, so to speak, but still have this like really profound awareness and ability to work from the heart? And I'm not implying I haven't mastered, but there's definitely an awareness that I have about it that I think is worth sharing and bringing to the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I met Wayne Dyer towards the end of his life, he had leukemia, and he was that. He was this masculine like figure, and he embodied divine love and joy, and like just being in his presence. We were in Hawaii, we were in his house, and I was really intentional about meeting him. And one of my friends grew up with his kids, and he just was so like he listened so well. He asked us questions, and he said like everything was the key. The key for him to everything was just meditation, like coming, just being willing to meditate and being in those spaces. And he used to be a pretty ego-centered guy. If you look back at his early stuff, and like where he was, and he's, been through divorces and stuff, and he just exuded love. Like I just couldn't even speak when I was in his presence. And there, he gave us a big hug. He wanted to give us his book. He was so generous, and it was just one of those things where I think he finally got it. He got how to blend, like the masculine body and the spiritual teacher, and that beautiful, heart-centered, I can sit and listen and just, and like my very introverted friend is the one that talked the whole time because I was just in awe and I could, and I was nervous and all that. And, yeah, so it was just neat. So anyways, it makes me think of like, I don't know why, but I just had to share that. So.
I absolutely love Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I recently just returned from a Caribbean cruise with the great Anita Morjani, which she is definitely one of Dr. Dyer's proteges, and so had a great experience being in rather close contact with Anita and listening more about her work and learning a whole heck of a lot from her. So that was a life-changing experience that just kind of wrapped up for me less than a couple months ago. And so yeah, it's synchronistic that you mentioned Dr. Dyer. I feel like he in spirit has been kind of, and I really didn't know much about him at all prior to like, I would say 4 or 5 months ago, and have since like dove into quite a bit of his stuff. And then of course, Anita Morjani came along, and first I actually learned about, more about, Wayne Dyer from her. So yeah, very interesting.
I'm speechless. There's so much about this conversation and just all of the messages that I feel like I've been, even in my meditation, subtly like asking. I don't know what it is about you and this conversation. Like, you've illuminated so much for me just in this talk. So for that, thank you. I I mean, it's just, the universe kind of working its magic here. So thank you. I have really enjoyed this talk and hearing part of your story and hearing about the beautiful horses in your life and all the wonderful things you're doing with them and people and everything else. So again, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. A while back, Dad started asking people if they had a favorite book or a book that they were reading that they'd like to share. Do you have a book that you're working on that you'd like to share about?
So the book that changed my life is Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. It was the number one book that changed my life and put me on my path and kind of took me out of atheism, to be quite honest, and helped me start to heal my relationship with my dad. It's very nurturing for me to see you guys have a relationship, because I don't always have a great relationship with my dad, and I don't know if he even really likes horses. So it was really neat to see that you guys do this together. So that book changed my life, and I feel called to mention Yogananda because that's been one of the teachers that has influenced me. And so Autobiography of a Yogi is really powerful for people who are ready to start to explore, since we've talked so much about this space today. And my second horse, Lindsay, I used to call her like Yogananda, because she even, like, the way she would look at you with her eyes, at times I would just be like transported. So I always felt, just that great love. So, and then hopefully my book with Felici will come out in the near future. It's a labor of love to do a book or a card deck, and I'm excited to read yours, Jason, and hopefully, Alyssa, you will do a book, maybe a work of art of all the painted horse work in one book at some point.
That's actually a really nice idea. That'd be really cool. I look forward to reading your book when it's out, and I'm so excited for what the future has to offer for, I think, everyone, for like my life and everyone I'm coming in contact with, because everyone that I meet is like, everyone's on their own journey, and you're doing incredible things, and we're all connected, and I'm just excited to see where this goes. It's an exciting adventure and journey. Thank you for being a part of mine. It's such a joy to have had this wonderful conversation with you, and yeah.
Thank you so much. And for all the listeners, we'll be sure to put out links to the books that Kate has mentioned, and also links to her various areas of contact if you'd like to reach out and touch her and get in contact. Any last bits of wisdom for our listeners, Kate, or say farewell for now?
I love the name of the podcast. Just reinforce the heart, reinforce love, reinforce the horse.
I think we didn't ask our big question. How do you normally like to reinforce your horse?
Everyone has a different love language. So I like to get to know the horse's love language and give in that capacity. So certain scratches, certain treats, certain affirmations, all different.
That's great.
Same like humans.
Just listening
understand
and
the love language.
communicating what they need in the moment. I love it. With that, we'll wrap it up. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you so much for your time and efforts and all you're doing in the world. Love and light. Namaskaram.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaskaram. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you.